first start out by saying thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. This is a new journey for me and our team, which Sandy Kilburn is a part of and a big part of. And we're undertaking something that I have never done, never seen done. So this is going to be a new adventure, I think, for all of us. And I'll tell you a little bit more about how we came to do this. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. It's nice to see some familiar faces and see people again and hopefully meet some new ones. Again, just as a reminder, if you could turn your phones to mute or stun or something like that, that would be good. What I'd like to do is I want to make sure, this is actually the first time that I've done this presentation, so you'll have to bear with me if things fall apart. But what I'd like to do is make sure I get through it. And then you should all have a couple things, a copy of the presentation slides and also a handout from the community addiction workshops. And I'll reiterate this at the end again, but the most important thing to take away from here is the web address for the workshops, drhaakworkshops.com. Everything we do will be going to the website. So if you want to catch up on things, we will have recordings of all the workshops, so that if you missed one or you come in late or something like that, then not to worry. You just go watch it on the website and catch up. Or if I had spoken in terms that you can't quite understand, you can go back and kind of verify that stuff. So I do have extra copies of the handout here, as well as some posters, some larger posters that if people want to take them and put them up at their business or businesses that you frequent to kind of get the word out. So I'd appreciate that. So what I'd like to do is get through the presentation, and if you could note any questions that you have, I'm sure we'll have a little time at the end. If I can answer some of those, that'd be great. And if not, I'll tell you that I can't answer them. I'm not, right off the bat, a disclaimer, I'm not a wizard, I'm not an expert at addiction, I'm not an expert at anything. But what I'm here to do is to try to tell you a bit of my story. And that's what the workshops are really all about, is to take my story. I'm in recovery myself. I've been through a lot of things that these workshops are going to suggest. So I have a bit of a personal identity with those, as well as some of my medical background. So let me see. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So this is going to be a talk on the community addiction workshops. And what this really is this is a community approach to understanding and treating addiction. That's, to me, what makes this unique. This is not from the state, from the feds, and we'll talk about that later. Not from a treatment program that the word gets out. I want to try to build a program with everyone's help for rural communities. And so this, to me, is a grassroots effort to try to work with the disease, with people's citizens suffering from the disease of addiction. So this is about as Vermonty as I know how to get, because I live in Vermont because of community. And so this will be a community effort. Part of this whole community addiction workshops will be my attempt to give back a little bit to community. I always feel that if you're going to be part of a family or a community, there's an opportunity to share what the community has to offer, but there's also a responsibility to give back. So this is my effort to give back a little bit, but I'm also going to ask the community to give. And I'll talk about that as we go, but I need the community's help in order to build this program for rural communities. So whether it's a rural community in Vermont, in Iowa, Idaho, doesn't matter to me. We should be able to have some kind of reproducible model that can help rural communities tackle the disease of addiction themselves. So a big goal, but we'll see how we go with that. So this is a big mission statement, and I'm not sure how well we'll do, but this is the overall goal or mission. And that is to build a reproducible model. I see this as a package that you put on a shelf. And then when Idaho Rural Community calls and said, we want to do something within our community, then we could potentially send them that package. Not like it's perfect, but it's a model. We send them that package. And it's almost like a chia doll. If any of you guys remember that, and I'm sure I'm dating myself a little bit. But this chia doll, where you pour water on it, and it grows. The seeds are embedded in the doll. And that's what I'm hoping we can do here. They take the model, they take the package, it gets sent to them, someone goes and introduces that and brings in the community members of that community. Not us. We may help them with that. But they then identify people within their own community to try to build this foundation of treating the disease of addiction. So to build a reproducible model and to foster the development of community understanding, compassion, and individual member resources. So one of the reasons to me, and when you attend, or if you get a chance to attend, or you won't actually see any of the video clips on the website or on YouTube. They cut those out. But at the actual presentation, I will have video clips of different mentors, of different musical artists, to kind of bring a flavor of entertainment a little bit, because this is a pretty heavy subject, but also to help with the understanding of the disease of addiction. So, but I want to figure out, what is it that each of you, what is it that Ron here is going to do? What's Dave going to do? What's Dolly going to do? What is it that you can do individually to help in the fight of the disease of addiction? And I'll talk about that in a second. And to work from, instead of a just say no, put them in jail attitude, that we will punish the people with addiction until they get it right. Reminds me of an old pirate t-shirt that says, the beatings will continue until morale improves. What are you talking about? And I think this is why we've had problems tackling the disease of addiction, is that we're doing it from a punitive point of view, as if this is some choice that people have. And what we'll learn in the workshops, by the time you get to the disease of addiction, there's no choice anymore. That part of the brain does not lead the discussion. So this really, and that's what's been identified in the last, especially 10, 15, 20 years, identified, and that's why we now call it a disease, because that's exactly what it is. It's a disease that develops within, not addicts, but patients. And so hopefully we can better understand that and walk away with a little bit of, I hope, open-mindedness and compassion to try to fight the disease from a community point of view. So build a reproducible model, develop the community understanding, compassion, and individual member resources, and to better support the community citizens or the patients suffering from the disease of addiction. So my personal background, I practiced emergency medicine for 35 years. I joined right pretty much after I finished my training in a regional group called Emergency Consultants, Inc. That was in Michigan and a few states around in the Midwest, and then I ended up joining Spectrum Emergency Care, which at that time was the largest national emergency room organization. And so I had the opportunity to laterally move between their sites. They had like 350 emergency departments, big group. And so I could move laterally, and I actually lived a little time in New Mexico, in Santa Fe, and it really was beautiful. And it's, when you walk on the earth there, you know that there's a lot that's happening. So I directed different emergency departments across the country, and in '89, within that same group, within Spectrum, Northwestern Medical Center recruited me, and I was glad to come to Vermont. In 2009 was a big year. Shortly after I got here, I ended up founding, and several people are here from the Chronic Pain Narcotics Community Forum, and it was a volunteer group of community members that worked on trying to develop an understanding and standardizing practices between different physicians and providers to have common paperwork, common standards of operation. And then one of the last things we did was that group before we dissolved was we put on 2 conferences. One of the conferences was here in St. Albans at BFA, called the Community Conference on Prescription Drugs, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then we had the Managing Chronic Pain While Keeping the Control and Controlled Substances. And that was held at Burlington, and it was great. We had national speakers. The room held about 120, and we had 160 people show up. It was standing room only, and it was just really great. And then I started the transition from my directorships at Northwestern from the emergency department and the hospitalist program into full-time addiction medicine at Comprehensive Pain. And in 18, I joined Notch and became the medical director of the clinics, and also helped found Swanton New Day Treatment and Education Program, which is their opioid treatment program. So the development of the workshops really came from that. A lot of my really questions started from that. And so it was a great conference, 120 people came. And I wanted, because so much effort had been put in by that group, I wanted as many people to come as we could. I wanted them to come, I wanted them to come. But then actually, after it was done, I kind of thought, well, Ed, what is it that you want each one of these members to do? I mean, what do you physically want them to do to help with this problem? That's not typically something that each individual member would join into. We think about the state or the feds or whoever to come, a treatment program to come, and they'll help. But what is it that I wanted each, and I couldn't answer that. I went years and couldn't answer that as I practiced. And then a light went on. A little bulb, just like a night light, went on. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Maybe this might be an interesting way to have each individual member contribute. And that led me, I'm not much of a writer, you'll see that as I go along, but that led me to develop a story. And I'm a very visual kind of guy, and one of the opportunities I had, I've been to 2 treatment programs, and one of them was out at Passages. I was there for a month, and it was a fantastic program, and one of the people that helped me was a hypnotherapist. And I had no idea what hypnotherapy was. You know, I thought he would wave a watch, and he would, you know, put me to sleep or put me under and make me quack like a duck or do whatever he wanted me to do. And that wasn't it at all. And what it was, is it was taking visual imagery, and he would guide me through this imagery. And I would create from my past what I was seeing and experiencing. And it was unbelievably powerful. This was, they had a small little campus, and the hypnotherapist was about 2 blocks away. And there were times where I came out of those sessions and I would be weeping. It was just, I had never experienced anything like it. And so I end up in my own little way trying to do a little bit of that through my talks, with having you visualize something. Because at times for me, I learn much better in a visual. And so sometimes my patients wouldn't remember every detail, but they could remember the imagery that would bring them back to the detail. And so I do that. One of the things that this community forum and all my thoughts afterward made me want to kind of think about a story of the hole in the 7 shovels. And what that hole is the community hole of addiction. And the way I visualize this is you have a rural community, and they have this big hole called the whole community hole of addiction. And people, kind of come and they take a look at, trying to see the bottom of the hole, and they can't quite see what's going on. Maybe someone comes along that's influential to them, pushes them in the hole, and they advertently fall in the hole. Or maybe they just want to give it a try, see what's down there, so they go down in the hole. And then they can't get out. So how is it that we can potentially help fill that hole to allow those people to get out? So who's going to fill that hole? I don't know. The way we're thinking right now, it's either the feds, maybe the government, NIH, National Institute of Health, maybe the American Society of Addiction Medicine. So we wait on the feds to come so that they bring their bulldozer and they push in dirt and fill that hole. Or maybe it's the state, maybe the legislature, maybe the Department of Health, maybe some of the big institutions, UVM or Dartmouth, or maybe even Northwestern here. We as community members who have my husband or my niece or my uncle or a friend that's suffering from the disease of addiction. Yeah, that's what will happen. These people will do it, and they'll bring a crane and they'll fill the hole of addiction. And we keep waiting. We keep waiting. And maybe we also throw them in jail, so that helps them a little bit too. But what is it that we can do except be waiting and be frustrated that we can't seem to get help? So the thought is what about we, the community? Maybe we could do something. And what would it take? Well, I think it's going to take a pile of dirt and 7 shovels. And what would happen if each community member, maybe after work or work on your day off, goes to one of the 7 shovels that's stuck in this pile of dirt, right? So you got several shovels, and you take a shovel and you put in 1 shovelful at a time. Maybe you put in 4 shovels. Maybe you put in 10, because you've got time and energy to do that. But what I'm thinking is over a period of time, we community members will fill that hole of addiction. We don't need to wait for the feds and the state if we're a rural community. We can hopefully attack some of that stuff ourselves. So the goal of the workshop is to help a community and help each community member help fill the hole of addiction. So how are we going to do it? Well, the first thing I think we need to do is better understand who and what we're fighting here. What is it that we're fighting when we say, yeah, we want to fight the disease of addiction? Well, maybe we should fight the addict. It's their problem. They're the one that made the choice to do this. No one forced them to take that heroin. No one forced them to drink that half-gallon of old granddad. That's their choice. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to fight the addict. Oh. I hate it when this happens. Or are we fighting the habits? Oh, I see. God, does that qualify me as a techie? I've never been called a techie. Or instead of the addicts, or should we refocus our efforts and fight the habits that they have? Yeah, that's it. It's not really the addict. It's the habits that they do. It's the crimes that they do to get the money, to get the drugs. That's what we need to do. We need to fight the habits. Or are we fighting the things, the crimes they do? Yeah, the addict wouldn't be that bad person. So we're going to make them stop doing the crimes and stuff. That's what we're going to fight. Or are we fighting what happened to them? That's interesting. But it's their choice. But what then happened to them? That's what we should be trying to understand and fight. Or are we fighting to help them? Ah, that's interesting. Now we're turning the whole thing around. Are we fighting to punish them? Or are we fighting to help them? Hey, I'm a techie junior. I just got this thing this morning. You can tell it, sure. So are we fighting to help them? Or are we really fighting the disease that they have? That's interesting. So if we could fight the disease that they have, then maybe they wouldn't do the crimes, and maybe they would be the addicts. So maybe we should fight the disease they have. Or are we fighting to help these patients? Well, if we really start thinking that this is a disease, then these are patients. They have patient rights. So when you know somebody who has diabetes, or somebody who has high blood pressure, or who has kidney disease, we don't fight them like addicts. We try to fight the patients, help the patients. Or are we fighting to help our communities? And maybe that's the bigger thing, is to rather than fight and punish the addict, let's try to help our communities to better understand the disease of addiction. Well, how the hell is everybody going to understand the disease of addiction? That's impossible. You can't do that. There's a guy, his name is Nick Eberling, and he's a fantastic guy. I went to one of my addiction conferences in Baltimore recently, and he was one of the keynote speakers. And he's this guy that came in, long shirt tucked out, he's got a baseball hat on. I mean, it was huge. There must have been 500 people there, big auditorium, beautiful. What is this guy going to be talking about? And he came out, and he was an entrepreneur, a techie business entrepreneur. And he has done some amazing things around the world, getting people new limbs, prosthetics, getting previous artists that have gone blind and to put different electrodes in their eyes so they could actually now draw again. And he created a company called Not Impossible. So his idea is, well, we're going to cure hunger. Right. How are you going to do that? Where do you start trying to take care of it? And one of his company's motto is, help one, help many. And so he tries, and he and his team try to help one person come up with some solution or remedy or treatment for something. And then he uses that prototype and then spans it out. So go online sometimes. He's just fascinating to listen to. His name is Nick Eberling. And the company is Not Impossible. So I don't think that this is impossible. Trying to come up with a program, a structure that allows community members to contribute to fighting the disease of addiction. So then came along the idea of the community addiction workshops. And the community addiction workshops, to me, are trying to have 4 avenues to share so that we can move forward on this. And avenue 1 is to try to share my patient's core curriculum. So when I was treating people, I'm not right now in clinical practice. I work for the state of Vermont as a medical consultant for the disabilities unit. And but when I was treating my patients, another light bulb went up. But I thought, if I develop some talks from some of my experiences and understanding, maybe I could get or try to have my patients better understand what's going on. What's going on with their body? What's going on with their brain? Why is it that we do the things we do? Am I a bad person? Am I just, You know, was I born bad or what is, I don't know what's going on. Well, if we don't know what the disease is all about, how are we going to fight it? How are we going to treat it? So I really committed myself to develop a series of talks to help my patients better understand the disease and thereby allow them to better move forward in their recovery. And it was amazing how it did. So each of the workshops, so what I've done is I've taken that core curriculum, the Haak curriculum, which we said at that time, and I've tried with my team to maybe smooth out an edge here or there and try to share that curriculum with the community. So it is my goal, if I'm doing any good at all in mentoring or teaching or sharing, if I can take the medical concepts and some of the information and bring it down to a level that I can even understand and share it with you guys, maybe that's what this is all about. And maybe we could feel pretty good by the end of the core curriculum. Each of the workshops has a narrative, so I've written narratives for each one of these. So as I do the talk, if you want to go back and look at the workshops online, then you'll have the narrative that you can pull off of the website. All the stuff that we do ongoing, it's not there yet, but as the workshops progress, all this information will be on the website for you to, in the comfort of your home. I've developed exercises. One of the things I did is I actually wrote tests for these modules. So my patients would take this information, listen to it, take it on paper, go home and do a take-home test. And I was amazed that they were thrilled to do this stuff. And they would come back all excited. I saw them more and more incorporate these fundamentals, you know, Addiction 101, into their understanding of what was going on with them. And it was just fantastic. So we reviewed the exercise. Some of them have worksheets that you actually need to do something on and think about. I will be presenting several graphs that will visually show you what the discussion is all about. And we'll go through those here in just a minute. Here's some of the topics of the workshops. So the first thing I did with my patients, and the first thing I'll do at the workshops, is I'll share my story. It's not like I've got any wild and crazy story, but it's my story. And it will let you understand how I got to where I am, how I went through some of the things I went through with my addiction, predominantly to alcohol, and how I fought that. And so we'll take that journey of my story. We'll start off. When I did this with my patients, it was really, really good. I tell them my story, and immediately their shoulders went down, and they kind of landed in what they thought was the right place. Because now they were talking with someone who's got the same problem. We now speak the same language. And I've been through many of the experiences that these people are experiencing. So we'll talk about my story. We'll talk about the history of opioid use. Where did this come from? How did it get here very quickly? We'll talk about the two main causes of addiction. Many experts feel that the two main causes of addiction is I call it genetic vulnerability and stress. And we all appreciate stress differently in our life. We all determine our own emergencies, as I learned being an emergency room doc, is that what's an emergency to me is not what's an emergency to you, it's not as an emergency to you. And so we just need to do the best we can with that. And the two main causes of addiction, they think, is genetic vulnerability and stress. And I will visually take us on a little bit of a hike to illustrate how that genetic vulnerability comes about. We'll talk about the two main parts of the brain, the frontal cortex and the midbrain, and how they talk to each other and what happens in the decision-making and how the disease of addiction really takes hold. We'll talk about the medical disease model and the parity test. We'll talk about, from history, back in the 1920s, there was a medical disease model. And the disease model is to identify an organ that has a defect that gives you symptoms. That's the medical disease model that all diseases need to fit. And for the longest time, we providers and the research people didn't know what the organ was. What's the organ that's causing addiction? And so what they thought was it's not a disease. We couldn't fit the organ defect, the symptoms model, the medical disease model. And so it wasn't a disease. It was a moral decision-making on the addict's part. And if we put them in jail and punish them, then they'll straighten up. And for the last 100 years, that hasn't worked. So why hasn't it worked? You can punish these people suffering from addiction. You could punish me as much as you want when I was having my trouble. It didn't matter. I punished myself all day long, every day. So you can throw whatever you want in there. I don't care. Kill me if you want. Have fun. But it doesn't work. And so we'll talk about the medical disease model. And the parity test comes from Dr. Kevin McCauley. And his talk talked about, well, if we're kind of call this a disease, well, then we start thinking about how do we treat the person that has type 2 diabetes? It starts off as a choice and develops into a disease. How do we treat diabetes differently than addiction? If they're both diseases, they're both patients. Well, how do we think about that as a community, and how do we think about the treatment for that? We'll talk about a fire drill. A fire drill is another kind of visual that I do of there being a wastebasket that starts to smoke because someone threw a cigarette in the paper, in the wastebasket. And that smoke then represents this stimulus, this yearning, this feeling of using. And if we can identify that smoke, what are we going to do to prevent us from relapsing? That's the fire drill. And then we'll talk about relapse plan. Relapses, as AA or NA will say, relapses are part of recovery. That's just what happens. This is not a straight line. This journey is not a straight line. It goes a little over here, a little over here, a little over here, a little, but at least we're going in the right direction. So the relapses are not the most important thing. The most important thing is the relapse plan. What are you going to do when you do relapse? Because you don't want this fire to get out of hand. So what are you going to do as soon as you see that fire, as soon as that relapse happens, and get back on the right track? We'll talk about the biopsychosocial spiritual matrix. This is something that was the foundational element of my practice. I call it the life matrix, the matrix. So everyone knew whenever we said the matrix what was going on. So what this is a dissection of maybe not all, but many, 12, 15 aspects of someone's life. And I'll show you that next time. So that's the life matrix. And this is really helping people with their life. Because my feeling is if you don't help people with their life, you can't build a second floor and a third floor and put a roof on it if you don't have a solid foundation. Because eventually that foundation will crumble and the house will come down. And things get bad very quickly. Dominoes fall very quickly with people suffering from addiction. We'll talk about the dopamine pleasure spike. This is a very exciting thing, and if I even may say so myself, this really graphically, these are one of the graphs that I distribute, graphically shows you what happens in the disease of addiction. And it's really amazing when I would present this to my patients, that they would say, Dr. Haak, this is exactly what happened to me. This is exactly how I feel. And I felt the same way doing it, so that's a real exciting topic. We'll talk about the opioid effect graph. You know, there's a lot of conversation of, even within AA, drives me nuts when people are in AA and someone says, well, yeah, you know, I'm on Suboxone or I'm on buprenorphine, and immediately they say, well, then you're not in recovery. What are you doing here? All you did is exchange one addiction for another addiction. You just changed your Dilaudid to Suboxone. But that's not it at all. Suboxone, buprenorphine, is a medication. It's not a great drug of abuse because of its inherent properties. And it's the only drug out there right now, buprenorphine, that is nationally used to treat outpatient people suffering from addiction. And so I draw a graph and I try to depict what's the difference between the Dilaudid and the fentanyl and the Percocets and the Vicodin and buprenorphine. And now I get why everybody's going to buprenorphine and why buprenorphine is a medication. It's not a drug of abuse. If it were up to me, I probably would put Suboxone strips in the bathroom at the Department of Health right along with the condoms. That's how important it is for me to get the medication out. Because there are little precautions, but not many. It's a very safe drug, and it can save people's lives and get them into the treatment of addiction. But we'll talk about, and I'll graph all that out. We'll talk about mutual support groups. Melinda White, who's one of my team members, she will actually lead this workshop. She's done a tremendous amount of work within AA and NA. And we'll do a mock AA-NA meeting for all the attendees to view if you've never been to a meeting like that and what it means. And then we'll talk about the recovery plan. And that puts all this stuff together. And this is what we're going to use for the duration of our recovery. So that's the first avenue, is to share some education. The next avenue is to share the life of an addict. Or better yet, let's start thinking of the life of the patient suffering from the disease of addiction. So what I want to do, I think it would be fun, and it could be, if I could pull this off, very interesting, to walk in the shoes of someone suffering from addiction. You don't always get that chance to get a bird's eye view of it. So what will happen is we will meet as a group at our first workshop. We will meet Michael Test. That's the patient that we're going to be following. And I will present in a written form his complete life within what I call the matrix, the biopsychosocial spiritual matrix. So I'm going to talk about everything in his life, and I will set the stage for you to introduce you to Michael Test. And then, between workshops, we will be emailing you, the attendees, as you sign in. You put your email address, and we will send you what I call injects. And that comes to me from, I was in emergency medicine for 35 years, so when you get these regional or statewide disaster drills, their scenario is set for you, the play is set. But then they give you different inputs, injections, and they call those injects. So what we'll do is, between workshops, we're going to email you the latest update on Michael Test's life. And then I want you to think about that as you come to the next workshop, and we will all talk about Michael Test and what's happening here. And then there'll be a summary or an up-to-date matrix. So from the initial scenario of Michael Test, you then get an inject, what's happened with Michael over the last month. And then there will be a summary, which will now include everything, including that inject. So by the time we're done with these workshops, you're going to have a very big document. It will actually be a novel of Michael Test's life. And you will have experienced that as we go along. And these are the matrix. So what I've done is I've taken his matrix, the biopsychosocial spiritual matrix, and these are the components. And these are the things that we will talk about in Michael's life. We'll talk about his transportation, his housing, his employment, finances, relationships, insurance, his legal justice, or DCF, his education, his diet, food, clothing, his personal activities, his spiritual activities, his dental care. Every one of those items I have written about for you to understand who Michael Test is and his life. And then as any of these change, it will come in the inject. And it will affect certain portions of his life. And then the summary document will show you the whole thing of where he is starting the next time. So the injects in his life, they're the updates of the email between workshops. And these are real life events. These are not fairy tale stuff. I have not reproduced an exact patient of mine, but I'll tell you, these are real close. This stuff happens. So I'm not making up this fake story. We are all watching the life of Michael Test develop. So we're going to do the initial life matrix, the injects between workshops, and the summary up-to-date document of his whole life. I will be passing out the introductory scenario, the first inject, and the summary at the workshop 1, so that everybody understands what these documents are all about and how this game is going to be played. But then from there on in, it will be on the website. And you can go to the patient scenario and see all these different things. I've tried to organize it with some help as best I can for you to easily do that. So at the conclusion of that, we're actually going to walk in the shoes of Michael Test. So that's Avenue 2. Avenue 3 of the program, so the first is education, better understanding the disease. The second is walking in the shoes of the addict. And now this is the part where I want your help. I want you guys to give me all the ideas you can about those different aspects. Of his life. And so we're going to do a mock brainstorming, and I'll lead that at the first workshop, so that everyone gets familiar, and I will pass out the bullets of what the brainstorming session will be like. It's not going to be a discussion. I don't want particularly any discussion. That's my job as the facilitator to put a nix to. What I want is I want everyone uninterrupted, without judgment, without criticism, to come up with ideas, and I want to squeeze every idea you possibly got out of your head during this brainstorm. And we're going to put all these ideas, then we're going to collate all those ideas, and that will then give us the brainstorming from this community about the topic. The first one will be transportation. So we're going to identify ways that each individual community member can become an active player, be an integral component of a recovery system, and build what I call, and this is now the package, what I call the Community Member Resource Organization. I think, and I've been in treatment programs, I have been the director of a program, but I think there's a huge resource out there that we're not tapping into. And that's called each individual community member. What is it that a treatment program, how is it that you, within an organization like this, can contribute to a treatment program if they're willing to do this? Or, in a real rural community, how can you get started before the feds and the state come with their bulldozer and their crane? So we'll identify one topic. So for example, I'll tell you now, we're going to do transportation. The mock will be on transportation, and the first workshop the next time will be on transportation, because that's a huge item. And we actually, as a team, Sandy, you were part of that, we did a brainstorming session. And it was very interesting, some of the ideas we got in a very short period of time. But I want it to come from the community. And the first one will be on transportation. The next one may be on employment. The next one may be on housing. But I will announce that at the workshop 1, what we're going to do for brainstorming workshop 2. So you guys can already think about those things in preparation for the second workshop. We're going to follow a formal structure. It's going to be led by a facilitator. We'll ask for a scribe from the group. And I don't know how many people are going to come to these workshops. It may be 3 of us, it may be 30 of us, it may be 130 of us. But then we'll have a scribe to write these things on a flip chart as we go through, and that will allow me to capture them, and they will all be on the website. And during this whole thing, the series of workshops, If you come up with an idea, a new idea, you can email that to us and we'll add it to the ongoing list for the resources that the community can use. We're going to squeeze the brain sponge of everybody there. There's no judgment, no criticism, no interruption, no discussion. We'll probably have some kind of a talking stick that we will pass from one to the other, and whoever has that stick does this. And then we'll keep an ongoing list, and then you can email things. And then by that, I hope we will cover a good chunk of all the matrix items. And we will come up with a whole light community resource organization to help people suffer from addiction. The last part of this, the fourth avenue we want to share, is training. Training for the Narcan overdose kits, and they now call them harm reduction packs. And they come with the overdose kit and the flyer telling you how to use it, and some information on HIV and hepatitis C, resources in the state. So it's a little more than just a spray. But this is a state training. We'll do a data collection from those as to how you got to the workshops, why are you in this training. But Melinda White will lead these trainings. She does them all the time. This will be during the last half hour of the night. People don't have to come. It's not tied to the original workshop necessarily. Whoever has interest in getting overdose kits, then we'll be able to train you in 20 minutes and pass those out, and you can actually go home with a couple of overdose kits. So you'll get the harm reduction packs, and you'll get 2 Narcan overdose nasal spray kits. The reason you get 2 and not 1 is depending on the dose of the opioid that the patient has taken and overdosed, the dose and the kind or the different drugs will depend on how much of the overdose kit you need to use. So you spray 1 into their nose. If that helps them, fine. If it doesn't, you spray them again, and that may be enough time for you to wake these people up, call the ambulance, and then they'll take it. And what I'm hoping is if this workshop series can save 1 life, then I think this whole thing is a success. This is unbelievable that we're losing so many young people with such capabilities. And if we can save 1 life from someone from suffering from the disease of addiction, then that's a great thing. So the journey, I know, will be difficult. I try to make it as kind of fun. This will be good, but it's not going to be fun. This is going to be very difficult, and this will be very emotional. And as you understand this and get more information, you know, it's the old adage, the more you know, the less you know. Things are going to get very confusing because you're going to start learning more about and realizing more about, and the more you know, the more questions you got. So this will not be an easy journey. But I think it's going to be a necessary journey. If we really, as community members, want to try to do something individually through, I hope, this kind of a structure, I think it's necessary that we really do something about this. We've been fighting this for a couple decades, and we've still got people dying, young people, capable people dying. So I think we as a community, and each of us as community members, could potentially be helped by the workshops. And that's why we are considering this a new day potentially in the life of these people, and a new way. The new way is that we're trying to build these seeds of support to someone with a disease of addiction from the community up, not from the feds or the state or the treatment programs down, and hopefully someone we know will get in or can get in. We're going to do this from the community up. So that gets back to our original mission, our goal statement. And I hope now you can better understand the goal, the mission of the workshop is to build a reproducible model, a structure that can be shared. to foster the development of community understanding, compassion, and individual member resources. So now we understand this better. Who is it that we're fighting? I don't think it should be the addict. I think we should help the community try to fight the disease of addiction and to better support its community citizen patients suffering from the disease of addiction. So that's what this is all about. This is the 20,000-foot view. And as we get to where the tire hits the road, see, these are some of the things that I would like to try to actualize at the workshop. So this is my contact information. There's my email, the website. Also on your handouts, the website is at the bottom of your handout. I have extra handouts here if you want them to pass them to someone you know. I've got posters if you're involved with a business or know of a business that wouldn't mind putting up a poster, please do so. So I thank you very much. Actually, we've got a couple of minutes, but are there any questions right now that you think I could answer or stumble around with?
I'd just like to make a couple of comments about this whole thing. Those that know me, I've been a pharmacist for 50 years and worked in Franklin County for my entire professional career. And this is not a new problem, obviously, but this is a 50-year problem for me. Because I can tell you back 50 years ago, I had kids sniffing Elmer's glue and Vicks 44. Then it went to Robitussin AC and Charcoal, which is cough medicine with codeine in it. Now I'm talking like 1960s. And these are problems that have gone for 50 years in my career. And then it went to Tylenol and codeine, it went to Percodan, then I went to Percocet, then I went to the morphines, then I went to the opiates. The opiates keep getting stronger because people are getting cancer. And if you see a sick person with cancer, they're really in pain. And they need these drugs. But unfortunately what happens, they wind up on the street. And I've seen now in my professional career, I've seen so many kids, 18 to 22 to 24, that are on Suboxone, but they've been addicted to opiates for some of them since they've been 15. And it's really a sad, sad state of affairs. So I'm just trying to give you some input of how serious this problem has become. I would say that it probably is unheard of that 20 to 30% of the kids at BFA or any high school in the entire country are either experimenting with opiates or have taken opiates at some time along the way. So anyway, just to reiterate and to support Ed's program here, I think this is something we all really have to take serious because each one of us is affected. And I don't think, a lot of us probably don't even know it, but our grandkids, our neighbors, our friends, and a lot of them have problems. And I know it because I fill the prescriptions for the Suboxone. But most people don't. So this is really a great program that's put together, and I think we all should take heed to it. Thank you.
Any question, comment?
Could you read your email first?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. My email is edhaak, EDHAAK, at, oh, actually, you know that's wrong. It's, thank you. It's edhaak777 at gmail.com. And the website is at the bottom of your handout. Please take the handout. It's drhaakworkshops.com. Any other questions, comments, sir?
Do you include nicotine as an addictive form of some kind?
You know, Dr. Mateo, one of the doctors that I'm speaking with, you don't have to have a drug to have an addiction. It can be a behavior. It can be, yes, nicotine is very addictive as a substance. But there are behaviors, gambling, sex. He has an addiction to shopping, he'll talk about. of these behaviors, it's all driven. This whole thing is driven by pleasure. That is what the body sometimes uses to put into survival. Generally, survival is food. The things that the midbrain think of are food, sex, kill. Food because you need nutrition to stay alive. Sex in order to develop your family, keep the clan going, keep the population going, and kill. You may need to defend yourself. So those are survival elements. And what we find happen over the evolution of the disease of addiction is the frontal cortex, one of the two main parts of the brain that's involved, is the logical, rational, decision-making part of the brain. So it says, you know, I really enjoyed that cigarette. I like that. Psst, midbrain, way down there. Midbrain's way down here. Frontal cortex, right here. Psst, midbrain, do me a favor to remember, I really enjoyed that nicotine. Okay, I will. Thank you. Appreciate it. Then you have another one. Maybe you try a different. Maybe it's those Camels. I really like those. Or maybe one of the Canadian cigarettes. Holy mackerel, I really like those. As a matter of fact, remember, midbrain, do me a favor to remember that I like 2 of them more than I did 1. So can you remember that for me, that I like having 2 cigarettes more than 1? Yeah, I got it. Well, what happens over a period of time is the midbrain's not dumb. Matter of fact, it's probably one of the most important because we've got to survive before we think about making decisions. So what happens is the frontal cortex actually teaches the midbrain what's important. And it does that through the process of the pleasure center of the midbrain. So what we really find is the cause. Remember we talked about the medical disease model? Organ, defect, symptoms? The organ is the brain. We never knew much about the brain. We barely know anything about the brain. But the brain, now through scans and PET scans and all kinds of where we can see how different parts of the brain light up with different activities, with different nucleotides. So now all these show us the organ's the brain, the defect is in the pleasure center of the midbrain. That is the disease of addiction. When you have diabetes, you have the organ is the pancreas. The defect is that you lack the beta islet cells that produce insulin. The symptoms are you have a high blood sugar, you may get clogged distal arteries, a new sensation, you may have heart disease, all that kind of thing. So that's the organ disease symptoms for diabetes. But when now, in the last 15 years or so, we now know why we call addiction a disease, because the organ is the brain. The disease is in the pleasure center of the midbrain. And you know all the symptoms of people suffering from the disease of addiction. That's why we're calling it a disease. And that addiction can be to a drug, a substance, which is an outside substance to bring in, or it could be from what we call endorphins, which are our own internal pleasure stimulating, dopamine stimulating. So whether it's going gambling, the latest disease is internet. It's true. And it's addictive to people. And they develop this disease. It can't be without it. That's because they get pleasure from that. And the frontal cortex is taught the midbrain that food, sex, kill. But really it is, what I want you to remember, Mr. Midbrain, it's drug, food, sex, kill. The drug comes first. It's not a choice. This is survival to the midbrain. I will make sure, Ed Haak, that you've got bourbon in the house. And if I didn't have my old granddad with me, I didn't feel good. I needed to have the comfort and the security of my granddad. That was the survival aspect of my midbrain. I wouldn't eat. I wouldn't have a relationship to have sex. I wouldn't think about offending myself or anything. I needed that first thing of survival, and that was a drug. That was a substance. That was your nicotine. That was my alcohol. That's someone else's heroin. Once we get that settled, then we'll talk about food, sex, clean. This is not a choice. This is not fun. This is a disease. And the more we understand it, and the better we can support people we know, and the better that we can help fill